Hello. I am introducing a video series entitled Chariots of Consciousness. And this is a overview, quickly and concisely, as to its content and the crux of what it tries to get at and what I'll try to convey to you guys throughout the making of this series. And so it will start with essentially defining consciousness. And that will be done with an analysis of the hard problem versus the easy problem, as coined by David Chalmers, the philosopher. And the hard versus easy problem is basically the hard problem being that of the origins of consciousness, how subjective experience arises, what makes it unique to each individual, and the easy problem being the neurobiological correlates between voluntary action, thought, emotion, and that of the brain. Essentially a third-person scientific analysis of voluntary movement versus what regions of the brain are correlated to those movements. Essentially like throwing a rock in a well and listening for the echo using an EEG. You'll have a subject, they have a subject move their arm and they look at what part of the brain's activated during that time. So you're establishing correlations between activities and action by the human body in comparison to the neurobiological component, which is, whatever lobe of the brain is firing at that time, what bulk of neurons is responsible for that action. So you're looking at science here on the easy problem and philosophy and religion on the hard problem. And we'll discuss those in detail. And moving on from that, as far as definitions are concerned, we will look at, as far as consciousness and the definition of consciousness is concerned, we'll look at the first person and the third person. First person versus third person. So subjective versus scientific. So what makes somebody their own individual? Is it like something to be you? Is it like something to be a bat? Is it like something to be a dog? That's the first person self-reporting mechanisms of consciousness that are very difficult to measure accurately in a lab. So we'll discuss those things. And then the second component of this video series, which this first portion will take several videos and be very detailed. This is just an idea of what we're looking at there. Hard versus easy, first versus third. We come up with some sort of comprehensive definition that includes all musings from all philosophers and scientists of merit. And then we'll move on to origins of consciousness. And the origins of consciousness will, like I had said earlier, I'll look into the neurobiological proposition of emergence. Essentially, this postulates that consciousness is merely the arising of information processing at a very high level. So as you arrange information processing organs like a brain in a center and you create a nervous system, as it becomes more complex through natural biological evolution, you start to develop consciousness as a direct result of that. Essentially, it's an emergent phenomena, but not necessarily either, because it doesn't meet the definition of emergence in science either, but it's a prevailing theory, it's a physicalist theory, it's a materialist theory, and a view of the world that's simply rational. And then second to the neurobiological emergence, I will look at panpsychism, which is poorly named, unfortunately, because it doesn't have anything to do with pans or psychics. But I guess we'll go with that title anyways, as much as it disparages the principle. To me, I give a lot of merit to this theory. It's very interesting. It's almost like the Higgs boson of consciousness. And the Higgs boson is basically the most fundamental subatomic particle that gives mass to other particles. And they postulated its existence with the idea of having a Higgs field. And then they observed it with the Super Hadron Collider, the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland. They were able to basically distill this particle and determine its real existence. And so panpsychism proposes that consciousness also has a Higgs field, essentially a very fundamental field, and that everything you see, non-living or living, has a component of consciousness to it based on its just simply existing and having a place in the world. And then at the end of that, we will look at the religious musings on consciousness. And going back to the Bhagavad Gita and the Dhammapada and the Bible. And I will ultimately conclude with Genesis, as it's the most brilliant, beautiful metaphorical analysis of consciousness provided to us on a metaphysical level. And that will be the Chariots of Consciousness series. I hope you guys will enjoy it, and I just wanted to get you guys an outline out there.